Chapter 35 First Skirmish 1 Around the Web. The surprising link between your pillowcase and aging. The surprising link between your pillowcase and aging. Support your neighbors and get involved with food rescue. Support your neighbors and get involved with food rescue. The smart approach to selling your home. The smart approach to selling your home. This was quite an interesting scene. There was a man, a bunch of whimpering mutated dogs, and one final mutated dog deep in death throes that was spraying extremely toxic body fluids and innards around as it writhed in pain. If this was supposed to be funny, it really wasn't. If this was supposed to be horrifying, it also kinda wasn't. Neither amusing nor blood-curdling, left one with a feeling of speechlessness. The other mutated dogs hung back while watching their buddy die slowly in pain, while Dante remained near its body with a menacing posture. The moment the mutated dog died, he placed his hand on its corpse and activated his absorption superpower the same way he did with quantum entanglement. Immediately, one could see a visible wave of greenish-red light emerge from the corpse of the mutated dog that entered into Dante's body, looking like a mixture of mist and lightning. Dante had always wondered what it would be like to plunder or devour, absorbing the power of another for your own and feeling your own power rise in tandem. You might assume it was euphoric, and that would only be partially true. Dante would describe it as the feeling when a male was about to orgasm but hadn't reached the peak. In other words, those last few seconds of build-up before the explosion. And then the absorption stopped, and it was like being forced to stop midway. Dante's eyes became bloodshot not from anything, but from the urge to slaughter. In this moment, he understood why users of such a power were usually psychopaths with bloodthirsty natures, willing to kill anyone or anything to increase their power. The feeling of being right about to reach the peak and then being cut off was extremely terrible. This power could not be given to the average man, and the average man should never wish for it. You would be putting yourself under the worst kind of torture that required iron-like will to survive without losing your mind completely. Dante received the feedback from absorption and knew how much he had become stronger. Absorption fed back a percentage of the target's stats based on the rank of the superpower. At the F rank, Dante only got 10% of it, hence his SDI increased as such. Player name: Dante. Player race: human. HP: 11.5/11.5 strength, 1-1.3 agility, 1-1.35 dexterity, 1-1.4 intelligence, 1-1.02 constitution, 1-1.15 vitality, 1-1.15 mutation index, 0%, safe, adds by pub future radiation index, 10%, okay, superpowers, quantum entanglement, absorption. The mutated dog had increased Dante's stats by a significant amount at this early stage, making him nearly 1.5 times as powerful in an instant. And this was just one corpse. There were 5 more dogs here. If he were to kill them all, and assuming their stats were to be the same as the one he just took down, then he could even easily surpass his SDI in real life. Against other players and NPCs of this world who all had 1 point in all fields, Dante would be like a god. His breath hitched at this thought, and his already unstable mind from the stimulus of the superpower could no longer process the risks accordingly. The normal Dante would obviously be tempted, but know that fighting 5 dogs came with the risk of death at the slightest mistake. It was better to use his current deterrence to back away and flee than hunt down single targets smartly and efficiently in order to raise his SDI in a semi-safe manner to a certain point before entering the city. But looking at the current him, he clearly was not capable of such rational thought. Dante practically roared as he flexed his muscles and felt the increased strength, craving more. He charged at the 5 remaining 2-headed mutated dogs with his knife in hand, shocking the beasts but arousing their ferocity. They still held some fear from the sudden attack, but their instinct told them that Dante was not yet qualified to make them tuck their tails and flee. They barked menacingly with drool that sizzled the ground dripping from their jaws, and charged as well, spreading out to attack him. Dante ignored those that were flanking him and aimed at the mutated dog right ahead of him. It bayed and leaped towards his throat with its jaws open, which made it easy enough for Dante to plunge his knife right into the lower part of the jaw of its left head. In truth, dogs were quite scary to go against, but if you kept calm and had sufficient reflexes, they actually weren't that difficult to deal with. Their claws were not sharp like a feline to be used as a weapon, so they relied on their jaws to kill. Adds by Pub Future so, this limited the ways in which they could attack, making them predictable in a head-on clash. Of course, this was obvious to anyone, but it was the reflexes and getting past the fear part that made most people lose to dogs in head-on brawls. As for wolves, they were a different ballgame. However, none of these beasts were anywhere as large or menacing as a wolf. They barely passed Dante's knees in terms of height, and they were not that thick. The mutated dog's eyes widened as the knife plunged in, and the left head died immediately. As for the right, it whimpered with a dazed look and fell to the ground, inches from death. Two heads didn't necessarily mean two separate brains, but more like one brain split into two. If one half of your brain died right now, you would probably follow along with it no matter how healthy the other side was. But this was the least of Dante's worries. This dog had paid with its life for its fellows to get into position, and they sure as hell were not wasting the chance. The mutated dogs that flanked him circled around and leaped from where they were with their jaws outstretched. From right, left, and behind, all of them pounced at the same time, leaving Dante virtually no way out. Well, it was possible to just leap forward if one had great reflexes and reaction speed, then avoid the mutated dogs, then take them down one by one, but one would need a little something called training. Since Dante had none, he did try to dodge, relying on his natural instincts to step back, or in this case, step forward, but it was not good enough. Two pairs of teeth sunk into his right and left thigh, while another pair sunk into his lower back, causing him to shout in pain. The pain sobered him up, and he seemed to wake up from his haze of power lust. Immediately, Dante realized he had fucked up and was a victim of the downside of the absorption superpower, something that was created to balance its seeming limitless utility. Even if he could kill these mutated dogs, he would either die from bleeding out or from the poison of their body fluids, or even the radiation they had directly poured into his body. Still, where there was life, there was hope. Despite logically knowing he would probably fall over in death soon after, he was not dead yet, so he still fought for a chance of survival. Dante took his knife and plunged it into the head of the mutated dog biting his right thigh, forcing it to yelp and let go, then fall to the ground as its legs began twitching in an almost comical manner. As for the one biting his leg and back, they began to tear into his flesh, using their teeth to try and rip out the flesh they had bitten so Dante could start bleeding out. Anyone who had been mauled by a dog could definitely sympathize with the pain. Dante grabbed the head of the mutated dog that was biting his left leg and stabbed his knife into it multiple times with hatred on his face. The pain he had never felt before in his 21 years of life caused him to go berserk and crazy. Eventually, the mutated dog that got his back achieved its goal, and with a horrifying rip sound, fell to the ground with a chunk of human flesh and clothing in its mouth from Dante's back. Dante screamed and was immediately paralyzed by the pain. Luckily, it did not get his spine, but it did not matter as the final mutated dog that had hung back now used this chance to bite the arm Dante used to hold his knife. The dog with his flesh in its mouth threw its head up, and the piece of bloody meat went sky high, then fell down its gullet while it chewed it with relish. The mutated dog swallowed the meat, and its two heads' eyes seemed to narrow from pleasure and enjoyment. With a vicious bark, it leapt forward to get another bite of this sweet meat. Chapter 36, First Skirmish 2. At this time, Dante was surprisingly extremely lucid. He would normally go into shock from such pain, but the endless adrenaline being pumped into his system kept him awake, and the rapid battle commands coming from his brain kept him on his toes. At this moment, with his right arm locked and about to be mauled as a chunk of flesh would likely be ripped out while his back was sending him signals of pain that made him want to curl up and cry on the ground, Dante felt like he had never been more clear-headed in his life. He turned around to face the mutated dog that was aiming at his back, while swinging the other mutated dog biting his arms like a weapon, crashing it into the body of the leaping assailant and sending the two flying. He then ignored them, then placed his right and left hand on the two nearby corpses while he activated his superpower in full force. The light show occurred and Dante felt the same sensation, but much stronger. However, the pain, the fear of death, the will to survive, the adrenaline, and the burning, killing intent as well as hatred in his heart dulled the discomfort from having the ability done quickly. He then placed his hand on the third mutated dog and absorbed it as well. Rather, when he felt the surging power in his body, the confidence within him grew. After absorbing the three mutated dogs, his SDI had grown further. Player name, Dante. Player race, human. HP, September 5th, 16 strength, 1.3-2.2 agility, 1.35-2.4 dexterity, 1.4-2.6 intelligence, 1.02-1.08 constitution, 1.15-1.6 vitality, 1.15-1.6 mutation index, 30%, warning. Radiation index, 40%, warning. Superpowers, quantum entanglement, absorption. with his strength being more than double the average man's while his agility and dexterity had almost crossed the threshold of 3 times. The world seemed to change in Dante's eyes. He felt much closer to his natural strength in reality. But it was more than that. His movement and ability to deal with situations had doubled, giving him the feeling that the mutated dogs who seemed to be elusive and coordinated had become slightly less so. Not enough to magically make them seem clumsy, but enough that he no longer felt overwhelmed. He took his knife back from the corpse of the other dog, and then charged at the other two who had untangled themselves and were ready to fight. However, whether it was Dante's current movement or his ability, they felt a hint of fear as the intention to retreat came. Their instincts told them that the human before them had changed somehow, and his threat level had risen sharply. But it was too late to retreat. They could only bark menacingly to halt his charge, and then make a move. But Dante directly ignored them and pounced at the dog who bit his right arm, punching its right head and causing it to tumble backward as it yelped in pain. Dante then bravely grabbed the tail of the other mutated dog and then dragged it into the air, holding it by its tail upside down while it crazily writhed and struggled while barking and yelping. It was overcome with fear, as one thing that predators hated was having their weakness fully grasped and being left helpless. Even some domestic and tame animals did not like being held up in the air despite being in the safety of their owner's embrace, much less a wild one that was in the midst of a life-and-death battle. Dante ignored it and used it as a sort of club as he swung it, using its tail to smash into the dazed mutated dog that he had punched, which had a visible dent on the head that he struck. Ads by Pub Futurit was struggling to get up, but was sent back down into the ground while screaming when the dog Dante held crashed into it. What happened next, you can imagine. In his maddened berserker rage, Dante kept using the dog he held like a club and bashed the other one until both bodies became lumpy pieces of bloodied meat. Dante only came to his senses when the tail of the mutated dog in his hand was ripped off and the corpse landed along with the other one. He then breathed roughly as he fell onto his ass, his eyes extremely bloodshot. He was filled with anger, hatred, the urge to kill, to rip and tear, and Dante took a deep breath. He had to suppress his chaotic emotions, but the tears came from his eyes as he pushed himself to his feet. The pain that came washing in made him groan, but he walked over and absorbed both corpses as quickly as he could. After increasing his power further, Dante staggered towards the corpse of his former ally and absorbed that too. Now, his SDI looked a bit more developed. Player name, Dante. Player race, human. HP, 11/20th strength, 2.2-2.9 agility, 2.4-3.2 dexterity, 2.6-3.5 intelligence, 1.08-1.22 constitution, 1.6-2 vitality, 1.6-2 ads by Pub Future mutation index, 35%, warning, radiation index, 43%, warning, superpowers, quantum entanglement, absorption. Dante had twice the constitution and vitality of an average pure human, so even wounded and infected, he was recovering quite quickly. However, he would need proper treatment, and luckily he did have some basic supplies for this in his backpack. He also took what he could from his former ally's backpack and then shuffled out of this clearing to find somewhere to rest and recuperate. He also needed to deal with this entire experience and try to learn from it. Dante stumbled along in a semi-daze, his mind numb and his thoughts scattered. It wasn't until he came upon a small cave that he stooped and seemed to find his consciousness returning to him. Apart from plenty of bushes and this small amount of rock before him, which had an irregular-shaped opening in the front, there was nothing else around. The cave was not deep, and Dante could even see its end while standing outside. He staggered inside and saw that there was a makeshift fire pit in the cave that was covered with sand. The cave itself looked like it had been used before, but a long time ago. Clearly, someone else who had either been trekking to a nearby city for survival or someone hunting outside the city for something had made this cave their residence for a while. Whatever the case, they had conveniently set the foundation for Dante to use this cave. He staggered inside and then sat down on the smooth and damp ground, leaning against a nearby wall as his head drooped. He sat like this in silence for a minute or two before opening his backpack and checking the items inside one by one. There was a vial of some blue liquid marked with a messily written anti-mutation along with some syringes, and another vial of green liquid labeled anti-radiation. Dante took a syringe and filled it with each and shot himself. The moment it entered his bloodstream, he felt leagues better, and he saw his radiation as well as his mutation indexes dropping rapidly. With the relaxation came fatigue, and he couldn't even fight it if he wanted to. Dante was instantly knocked out on the spot, laying down on the ground as he fell into sleep after the adrenaline washed away. When he woke up, he felt extremely refreshed body-wise, but his mind felt heavy. His body was stronger than average, but his mind was only just slightly better. He looked out and saw that it was dark. He then uncovered the fire pit and realized there was no dry wood to use to light it up, so he would have to bear with the darkness. This was not a problem since he did not plan to spend the night here. He went outside the cave and tore some leaves, then sewed the remains of the tattered clothes from his friend's corpse to cover his body in the back of the cave. He then logged out of the quantum network and returned to his real body that was laying on his soft bed. Dante heard his bones cricked and cracked as he rose up, but there was not much stiffness given the doubled SDI. The first thing he did was rush to get a meal from the kitchen. He was utterly famished after not eating for almost a full day, and surprisingly, this would actually be his first meal in the eternal universe. His AI chip connected to the cooking apparatus and then selected a recipe based on Dante's wishes. Immediately, robot arms began preparing the meal according to the exact specification, removing spices from the shelves, then cutting up the various ingredients systematically. He was both hungry and amazed as he watched this feat of technology, as the appliances cooked the food themselves in tandem, despite the arms belonging to different appliances and not all being one thing.